Well, thanks very much for coming. I know a lot of you, I've met a lot of you before, and I just want to start with a little story. Florida's, no, there was a glass there, Armando. Yeah. I do a little bit of fishing. Florida's a very dangerous place, you know. I was doing some fishing the other day and I caught one of those flathead catfish, you know, they're vermin, basically. They got spikes like that. And I was pulling the hook out of its mouth and I pulled it like that, and I dug the spike into my stomach about that far.
Oh my goodness.
And they've got barbs on them. And trying to pull it, so I was standing on this dock with a catfish hanging out of my stomach. It was a bit embarrassing. I'm glad nobody saw that photo. But, so that's what happens in Florida. But look, everybody always asks me, they say, you know, I've been around 40 different, I've done over 400 speeches in your country, and everybody always says to me, why do I care about the United States? And I say there are two simple reasons. The first is simple gratitude. You know, my country was saved during World War II from invasion by the Japanese, by the huge sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway. And that's a very strong memory in my country, folks. The second reason is related, but it's a little more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. If freedom should ever fail in the United States, if you lose your constitution, your liberty, your economic dynamism, and your military superiority, all of which took a major trashing through the Obama years, if that trend had continued, people, we'd be living in a world run out of Moscow and Tehran and Beijing and Havana. And I don't think that's the kind of world anyone wants to leave to their children. So today I want to talk about national security. Now, Alex has talked about some of the very big players up there. I want to go a little bit a level down, but I think it's one of the biggest problems we face. You know, you military people in the audience, I know you've taken an oath at some point to defend your constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. And which are more dangerous, people? An enemy over there with a foreign uniform, or an enemy inside your inside your Congress or a Senate wearing a suit and tie and speaking your language? Who's going to cause you more problems in the long run, folks? Now, yes, exactly. So, now, has anybody in the room today ever had to undergo any form of FBI background check for a government or private position? A few of you, okay, quite a few. Now, is it true that those security checks can be very, very rigorous? They go through your underwear drawers practically. Check out your family background, your financial position, bounce checks, overseas travel, criminal convictions, dodgy relatives. I had a friend in Washington who applied for a federal government job mid-level. The FBI sent 2 agents all the way to Canada to interview this man's communist uncle. On the strength of that interview, my friend, a good conservative, was denied that position, not because he was a communist, because his uncle was. It was just too close a connection. And I'll tell you what, I actually support that, folks, because this is the federal government of the United States we're talking about. This is the leader of the free world. And this country has a history of a lot of enemies using your weak and dishonest to betray you. So when it comes to working for the federal government, I don't think you can be too careful. You've got to be trustworthy. You might be in charge of a nuclear facility someday. You might be writing education policy. You might be guarding the president. You might be in charge of a nuclear facility. You need to be trusted. But what if you're a young Marxist radical who hangs around with the local Communist Party, someone like Corinne Brown, who just got her just desserts over in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
You know? Or someone like John Conyers, who's just getting it right now out of Michigan. Or someone like Ted Deutsch, or many of the others, or Gwen Graham, or whatever, who hangs around with the local Marxists, or Andrew Gillum, who's standing for governor, who is basically a Marxist. They hang around with communists, but they can get elected to Congress, where they may serve on the Armed Services Committee, or the Homeland Security Committee, or even the Intelligence Committee of the House of Representatives, overseeing all 16 of your intelligence agencies. How much of an FBI background check do you need for that one, folks? Nothing. Zero. Because the people are supposed to vet the candidates, right? And the media is supposed to help you do it, right? Well, how's that been working out for you, guys?
Not at all.
Not at all. When the media's on the other side, that's a big problem. So you have got all of these people in your Congress who are basically there with no security background checks whatsoever. You need a security check to be a realtor in this state. You don't need one to serve on the Intelligence Committee of the House of Representatives. Now, do you think your enemies might be aware of that?
Yes.
Do you think they might even try and exploit it? Yeah. You imagine if you're a foreign intelligence officer serving out of the United Nations under diplomatic cover, and they have hundreds of them up there, from Saudi Arabia and Iran and Russia and China and Cuba and North Korea, and you're mixing with congressmen all the time, you're going to parties with them, you're playing golf with them, you're lobbying them, you're making friends with them and cultivating them all of the time, and you know that some of them are secret communists and some of them are secret Muslim Brotherhood sympathizers. You're working with these people. Do you not think your enemies are trying to recruit them? You imagine if you're a North Korean intelligence officer and you go home to North Korea after 5 years in the United States, and Kim Il whatever invites you to the palace for an interview, and he sits you down and says, "We gave you 5 years in America. How many congressmen did you recruit for us?" And you say, "Oh, none." Well, how's that going to go for your career, people? How's that going to go for your family for the next 10 years? You know, in our movie, and I really hope you get the movie Enemies Within, because we think it's the most comprehensive view of the communists and Marxists in your Congress ever produced. We have a little clip there from Andre Carson from Indiana, one of your two Muslim congressmen, heavily involved in several Muslim Brotherhood front groups, elected with Marxist help, but he serves on the Intelligence Committee. And we've got him in a Muslim Brotherhood front gathering in Connecticut in 2012. He gets up in front of the crowd and says something like this: "I understand there are people here watching us today, undercover. They are spying on us because they believe we are here plotting to overthrow your country. Well, I say to you people, those people watching us today, Allah will not allow you to stop us." This guy's serving on the Intelligence Committee, people. This has been going on for a while. This has been going for a while, people. You know, right now you've got normalisation of relations with Cuba, right? Well, that started under Obama, and Trump's rolled back a little bit of it, but not enough. He should roll it all back. But the Cubans have been sending drugs and terrorists and spies to this country for decades. They were involved in the LA riots, the Ferguson riots, you name it. And back in the 60s, 5 of them were caught with a whole apartment full of dynamite, which they were going to use to blow up Macy's on New Year's Eve in New York. Imagine what that would have done. So this is the reason we cut off ties with them, but Obama relaxed them. Now, that was done through the Congressional Black Caucus. That's about 40 members of your House. The organisation was set up by the Cubans. They go down to Cuba all the time. One of them, Barbara Lee's been there over 22 times to basically work with the Cubans to formulate how they can work inside your government to get trade and travel restrictions lifted on that country so they can send more terrorists and drugs here. What do you call people who go from your country to an enemy foreign country to help them against you?
Traitors.
And what's the penalty for that one, folks?
Yeah.
So why is it happening every day, people, and it's not even considered a misdemeanor? Nothing's done about it. This has been going on for a long time, folks. Do we have any Vietnam veterans in the room today at all? Wow. First thing, gentlemen, I'll say is thank you. Then I'd like to ask a couple of questions, if I may. One of them is very stupid, but I think you'll see where I'm going. Was the Vietnam War lost in the jungles of Vietnam?
No.
Is it true that you had some very tough rules of engagement? Your fighter pilots couldn't shoot without being shot at first. You weren't allowed to invade certain areas. You weren't allowed to chase the enemy across borders and hot pursuit. You certainly weren't allowed to mine Haiphong Harbour. You certainly weren't allowed. There's all these restrictions. I'll tell you how high this went. You had a Secretary of State during that time, a man called Dean Rusk, who was, I believe, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Every night he would get the bombing orders for North Vietnam the next day on his desk. That was where your planes were going to hit the next day. He would send that list to the Swedish embassy in Washington, D.C. every night, who would send it to the North Vietnamese, so they could bring their guns to the exact right position where your planes were going to fly the next day. How many of your airmen were shot down or captured or killed because of that man's treason, folks? Well, maybe. That would be poetic justice, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yes.
And is it true that when you withdrew, your Congress defunded the South Vietnamese military, basically guaranteeing a communist takeover? Well, I say this, people, you lost 58,000 young Americans in that war. Your high school buddies, your cousins, your uncles, the guys you went to church with, the guys you went hunting with, 58,000 young Americans who died in a war you were not allowed to win, let alone the millions of Vietnamese who suffered death, imprisonment, torture after the communist takeover. Well, I say this, that war was deliberately sabotaged in your Congress by people like Father Drinan, the congressman from Massachusetts, who was working hand in glove with the Communist Party USA, which was taking its orders directly from the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which was allied to the Communist Party of North Vietnam. Do you think there might have been a little bit of treason going on there, folks?
Yeah. What?
And how many of those traitors who condemned tens of thousands of your boys to completely unnecessary deaths, how many of them paid a single penalty for what they did, folks? One of them was Obama's Secretary of State, a man called John Kerry, otherwise known as Jane Fonda with less testosterone. And then another one of them was John Conyers. Well, thankfully he's going, people. He's been in Congress around 140, 160 years, but finally he's going. But I'll tell you straight, people, he has been the biggest traitor in your Congress, the most dangerous congressman for over 50 years. And I'll tell you why he was the worst, people. Because he was the ranking Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. And when the Democrats controlled Congress, as they did through most of his career, he was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the most powerful committee in your Congress. Now, which organisation in your country is charged with routing the spies and terrorists and traitors from your government, folks? The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And which committee in Congress does the FBI answer to, people? The Judiciary Committee. So on the Judiciary Committee, you have Judy Chu from California, who is a long-time supporter of the Communist Workers' Party, a pro-Chinese Maoist outfit. She goes to China all the time, building business ties between China and California. The Chinese press describes her as China's best friend in your Congress. And you want to see Judy Chu when the FBI has the temerity to arrest one of the thousands of Chinese spies operating in this country. You want to see Judy Chu go off on the FBI. You're racist. You're only picking on this man because he's Chinese. You want to see the hard time she gives to the FBI, folks. And then you've got Jerry Nadler from New York, a long-time card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists of America, your largest Marxist group. They have a big branch here in Orlando. Remember when Acorn got in trouble about nine years ago, and they had a congressional investigation into it, which got shut down. Well, Acorn was a front for Democratic Socialists of America, and guess who shut it down in your Congress, people? DSA member Jerry Nadler shut it down, helping his friends, right? And what about Luis Gutierrez, who also serves on there, who is also standing down, thankfully? Luis Gutierrez was a leader of the pro-Cuban Marxist-Leninist Puerto Rican Socialist Party. He was elected with Maoist help, Communist Chinese help in several elections, and he's a big-time friend of several Muslim Brotherhood front groups in Chicago. And then you go back to John Conyers himself. John Conyers has a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA. He was a founding member of Democratic Socialists of America. He's got a 30-year history with the Workers' World Party, which supports North Korea and Iran and Cuba. The Workers' World Party are the ones who have been tearing down Confederate statues in Louisiana and in North Carolina. He's also actively involved in several Muslim Brotherhood front groups and a big opponent of the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act. The Muslim Brotherhood, according to John Conyers in our movie, is just a social service agency now. They're not involved in violence, and we should allow them to continue. John Conyers is a hardcore anti-American Marxist-Leninist, as hardcore as you can get, people, yet he oversaw the FBI. So you're a young Marxist radical, you get elected to Congress, there's no security checks, the media's not going to touch you, and if anybody comes after you, if the FBI ever decides they need to investigate members of Congress, they have to come to the Judiciary Committee and basically say, is this okay? Well, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen to their budget next year, folks? Do you think the FBI is stupid enough to bite the hand that feeds it? So that is how you've been so heavily penetrated. There are no security checks. The media is controlled by the left, and there's no oversight in Congress, no internal security committees, whatever. John Conyers shut that down, by the way. So there's nothing. There's no internal security in your Congress at all. And you have people working with your enemies all the time. That's why you have a nuclear deal with Iran. That's why you have normalization of relations with Cuba. That's why you had Obamacare rammed down your throat, because you have enemies in your Congress working against you. You have got at least 100 members of your House, at least, and over 25 members of your Senate who are so enmeshed in neo-communism or Muslim Brotherhood front groups or both, they couldn't pass an FBI background check to drive a school bus. How can you survive, people, with a quarter of your legislature actively working against you? That's why America has its problems, people. Do you think the Russians would tolerate 100 pro-Americans in their Duma?
No.
Nobody else would, folks. Now, I want to talk now about what I regard as the biggest national security threat you face right now. And I'm not minimizing Russia or China or North Korea or Iran or ISIS or Al-Qaeda. But the most dangerous thing that is right in front of you right now and could destroy your country more easily than anything else is illegal immigration. Right now. And I want to explain why, because most people don't see it as a national security issue. But it is the biggest single threat to your constitution there is right now. And I want to go back a little bit. The whole push to illegal immigration, and it started back in the 1950s in California with a man called Bert Corona. He was a big-time Communist Party member and also a Democrat. He was the one, he worked with Robert Kennedy and JFK, and they set up the Viva Kennedy clubs in the 60s, the first organised effort to bring Latinos into the Democratic Party. He also set up, with a lot of Saul Alinsky money out of Chicago, a whole network through the southern border states of support groups for illegals. The purpose of these groups was to encourage illegals across the border, get them work in factories and farms, get their kids into schools, and get them settled into the community. The second, this Bert Corona died in 2002, but he trained hundreds of people to carry on his work for him. 3 of them are very prominent today in California. They have transformed that state, and the spillover is transforming your nation. The first of them is a man called Antonio Villaraigosa. Until recently, the mayor of Los Angeles and maybe California's next governor. He is a Marxist. He used to go down to Cuba to cut sugarcane for the Castro brothers. He is the man who forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws, leading to the influx of hundreds of thousands of illegals into LA and Orange County, transformed the whole region. The second member of this little group is a man called Gil Cedillo, a Communist Party USA supporter, until recently the Democratic head of the California State Senate. He is the man responsible for driver's licenses for illegals and many other things. Third member of this little group, the most powerful woman in California. I believe she's standing for Congress. She was the head of the California AFL-CIO. She is a member of the Democratic National Committee. Her name is Maria Elena Durazo. She is behind the massive union-driven and union-paid-for Latino voter registration drives and Get Out the Vote efforts that added hundreds of thousands of new Latino voters to the California rolls in the last 20 years. Almost all of them Democrats. Because of this deliberate communist operation, you cannot elect a Republican or a Conservative in California statewide now for love nor money. And that makes a very big difference when it comes to presidential elections, folks, because they have the most electoral college votes in the nation. Now, the leader of the amnesty movement today is a man called Eliseo Medina. You've seen him on TV, I guarantee it, wearing a purple shirt, leading an amnesty rally. He was a leader of the SEIU union, 2 million strong. He was also Obama's advisor on all issues of immigration. I've got Obama in my movie telling us that he would always consult Eliseo Medina before making any decisions. He is a member of Democratic Socialist America, a Marxist. Now I want to ask a little question. Any former or current Labour Union members here today? Okay, couple. Jerry, you're a union president, were you, Jerry? You're Richard Trump's deputy, were you? So, here's a question, guys. Which organisation in America 30 years ago was the most hardcore, actively, militantly campaigning against illegal immigration? Which organisation was constantly lobbying Congress to increase penalties on any employer caught employing illegals? United Farm Workers, Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez had people on the border, and he had a woman specially designated to go out into the fields and find illegals and turn them into the INS. And that woman is now married to Eliseo Medina, by the way. The unions were totally opposed to illegal immigration because illegals took their jobs, they lowered their wages and conditions and broke their strikes. That's what Cesar Chavez's complaint was. He couldn't get a strike going because the illegals would come in and break them. So the unions hated illegals. And the unions had influence in the Democratic Party, so you should have seen the speeches that Bill Clinton and Harry Reid used to make absolutely condemning illegal immigration. This is a national security disaster. 250,000 people coming into the country a year, taking union members' jobs, taking American jobs. This has to stop. That was only in the 90s people they were saying this stuff. But something changed. Because you think today, which organisation is leading the charge to legalise the illegals? It's the unions and the Democrats, right? Hillary Clinton promised to legalise every illegal in the country within 100 days of taking office. That was her promise.
Oh, sorry. Gotta have this on video.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulty
Yeah.
here. There we go.
Thank you, Amanda. So why the change? Why were the unions so militantly opposed to illegals and now they're completely supporting amnesty? Well, the change happened in the mid-90s because your unions used to be run by hardcore anti-communists like Lane Kirkland and George Meany. But in 1994, Democratic Socialists of America staged a coup and took over the AFL-CIO. Their member, John Sweeney, became president. He removed the anti-communist clause out of the AFL-CIO's constitution. It was illegal. You couldn't be a communist and hold office in the AFL-CIO. He took that out and the Marxists came flooding in. Every 60s radical became a union organiser or a union president, and they took over every single major labour union in your country. SEIU, AFSCME, United Auto Workers, you name it, they are all now communist run. If you pay dues to an AFL-CIO union now, you are supporting communism. So their agenda changed. They were there to help the American worker. Now they're there to promote communism. People, there is a huge difference. Before, illegals were a problem because they hurt American workers. Now illegals are an advantage. So why are they doing this? Eliseo Medina let the cat out of the bag at a big progressive conference in Washington, D.C. in 2009. I've got him on tape on my movie saying this. You can check it out. He got up in front of the crowd and said this: passing amnesty for illegal immigrants is the number one priority for the progressive movement. We have to get citizenship for these people. And did he talk about compassion or reuniting families or giving immigrants a break or the American dream? Not one single word, people. All he said was this: in 2008, Latinos voted overwhelmingly for Obama and progressive candidates. If we give these people citizenship and voting rights, if we give these 11 million undocumented workers citizenship and voting rights, they will stand with our movement. That will give the Democrats at least 8 million new voters. That will give them a full governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, forever. Think about it, people. There are between 12 and 30 million illegals in this country. They will vote at least 80% Democrat. Mitt Romney lost his election by 2.5 million votes. Donald Trump won by a couple of 100,000. You give the Democrats anywhere between 10 and 24 million new votes, people. Where does that leave you? You're done. That's it. That's a one-party state, people. Why did Hillary Clinton promise to give citizenship to every illegal within 100 days of office? Why did Barack Obama go way out on a limb to try and push amnesty through before the 2014 election, knowing it would cost him the Senate? Because Obama is a Marxist-Leninist. And Lenin taught you take one step backwards to get 2 steps forwards. So what? We give the Republicans the Senate for a couple of years. Big deal. We get amnesty. We will rule this country forever after that. How can you beat 8 to 24 million Democrat votes, people? You're going to struggle in this state because you have 500,000 Puerto Ricans coming in here. And you think they're going to vote Democrat, Republican?
No.
They're going to vote Democrat in big numbers, folks. And how Florida goes is how the country goes. It's very important. So you were this far away, folks, from a one-party state. That close. Election night 2016 could have been the end of America as we know it, but it wasn't. Who thinks there may have been a touch of the miraculous about election night, people?
I know it. I know.
I think even the most militant atheists would have to acknowledge that one, folks. It was a miracle. But it was a miracle that didn't change America. It gave us a last chance. It gave us our last shot. We have let this country drift for 100 years, folks, and been complacent, and it was this far away from destruction, and we got one last shot. People, if you read the Bible, the Old Testament, there's a lot of last chances in the Old Testament. A lot of second chances. You know, the Israelites, you've gone off the farm, you're not doing the right thing, get back on track. And sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. And if they didn't, there were always consequences, were there not? How many third chances were in the Old Testament, people? Well, we're on our second chance, folks. We are right on the edge of the precipice. And we've been given one last shot to change this. And just to digress a little bit, just to show what a change in culture that election night was, the Germans have a lovely phrase, it's Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in the pain of others. Now, at 2 o'clock in the morning, when you were watching those election results come in, and they panned the Democratic Party headquarters, and all these snowflakes were bawling their eyes out and hugging each other, did you feel a little bit of Schadenfreude? No?
What about
And do you think you darn well deserved it after 8 years of Obama trash in your country? Well, you hold on to that, people. Just treasure that moment, because we got to have more of them. And you deserved every bit of it. But this is where we are. We're on the edge of a precipice. We've been given a second chance. Now, have you ever seen as much hatred and vitriol directed at a president as you've seen at this one? Even Reagan, even Bush, it didn't come close to this. There's no let up. You know, Mrs. Trump can wear different shoes and it's a big deal, you know. It doesn't matter what it is. Now, there's 2 reasons for this, I think. One is very simple human nature, because these Democrats, these progressives, they thought they were going to have you. They were this close to having you under their control forever. And they were going to push their agenda down your throat, and there was nothing you could do about it. And they were so excited. And on election night, they had turned out it was like a bunch of kids who thought they were going to get the biggest bike you've ever seen for Christmas, and they got a pair of socks. And they are angry and bitter and resentful. And that's part of it. But that's not the worst of it, folks, because people get over that. But what the real thing is this: they understand that if Donald Trump is a successful president, they are done for a very long time. Okay? If he can change the direction of this country, see, the Democrats thrive on poverty, on identity politics. If he can destroy those things, and political correctness, if he can destroy those things, they've got nothing. They've got nothing positive to offer anyone. So this is how they see things. So if you're a Democrat, you own the black population, right?
Yeah.
You own the white union guys, right?
Yeah.
You own the Latinos. You own these minorities. That's your base. The Jewish, you own the Jewish communities. So when Donald Trump goes out to the black communities and says, I don't see what the Democrats have done for you guys. I see your cities are full of drugs and crime and dependence. Why don't you vote for me? What do you got to lose? A heck of a lot of them said, right, yeah. And when he went to those white union guys out in Ohio and Pennsylvania and said, I don't see a lot of industry here, guys. I don't see a lot of jobs. Vote for me. We're going to bring the industry back to the Rust Belt. They said, hell yeah. And you look what he's doing with Israel right now. There must be a lot of Jewish people thinking, yeah, this is really what I want.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of Latinos, they don't want amnesty. The legal Latinos here don't want amnesty. They don't like getting tarred with the illegal brush. So when he put a hard line on that, a lot of Latinos voted for him as well. And see, this is eroding the base that the Democrats own. And they understand that if black people start voting Republican and Latinos start voting Republican and union voters start voting Republican, they're done. They're over. That is why they are freaking people. That's why they're absolutely committed to destroying this president. They are cornered rats. Remember back in the Vietnam War, your guys had it won. With all the handicaps, you still had it won. But in 1968, they had a thing called the Tet Offensive. They threw everything at your troops. They attacked your troops all over South Vietnam. Suicidal attacks. And they got slaughtered everywhere. It was a total military defeat for the North Vietnamese. But it turned the tide of public opinion in America. It turned Americans against the war because they're thinking, we thought we had this won, but they're still coming at us. Is this ever going to end? Well, the left are doing their Tet Offensive right now. They are throwing everything at you in a last desperate effort to turn this around because they know if they don't, they are done. And this is what they intend to do. There are two steps. The first is we have to stop Trump, destroy Trump, denigrate Trump, and destroy his base every way we can. Well, are they trying to do that?
Yeah, but it's not working.
That's what they're trying to do? Well, it's at working to some degree. Hopefully not enough, but that's what they're trying to do, right? And they'll be going after Trump on sexual matters next. This Al Franken stuff, this was just setting it up for how they're going to go after Trump. So they're going to try and destroy him, but this is their plan. This is the two stages. First is destroy Trump. The second is this. Who remembers the old Rainbow Coalition of the 1980s? Jesse Jackson, right? Biggest scamster before Barack Obama.
Pimp Daddy.
Pimp Daddy. Yeah, well, you can do that. You know. And he's over in Silicon Valley, shaking down Silicon Valley right now. That's all he's ever done.
With his Parkinson's.
Yeah, well. But, so, he had this brilliant idea, right? And he borrowed it off Harold Washington, the mayor of New York and other, mayor of Chicago and others, the communist mayor of Chicago. What you do is you get a coalition together, the Rainbow Coalition. You get progressive whites, progressive blacks, progressive Asian Americans, progressive Latinos, progressive Native Americans, Muslims, and gays. So you got white, black, brown, yellow, green, red, and lavender. The Rainbow Coalition. That's how they talk. This is not me saying this. That's how they said it. So they said it themselves. And so you got this Rainbow Coalition, and you get them all together, and you stitch together a majority or enough people to win. But in those days, there weren't really enough minorities to do this nationwide. But things have changed, people. Now, out in San Francisco, there's a man called Stephen Phillips. Look up his book, Brown is the New White. It's endorsed by Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, and this is a blueprint for taking America down. What Stephen Phillips is going to do, so he was a Maoist at Stanford in the 80s, who's a member of the League of Revolutionary Struggle, which was very active inside the Rainbow Coalition. Phillips spent a whole year working for Jesse Jackson in 1988. Now, Phillips dissolved the League of Revolutionary Struggle in 1990. They all went into the Democrat Party. And he married very well. He married into the very wealthy Sandler family, multi-billionaire, big-time Democrat liberal donors. He used that money very intelligently. He set up a few super PACs. He was the first man to fund Barack Obama. And he has been setting up super PACs all over the country to support candidates of colour, progressive candidates of colour. They're backing Andrew Gillum right now for your governorship of this state. They're backing Stacey Abrams for the governorship of Georgia, and Ben Jealous for the governorship of Maryland. They're behind Tulsi Gabbard out in Hawaii, Mazie Hirono out in Hawaii, and a few others. What they're going to do is this. They are not going back to the middle. The Democrat Party is going full-on progressive because this is Steve Phillips' argument. 26% of the electorate are progressive whites. They will vote Democrat even if Adolf Hitler was on the ticket. They wouldn't care. The 25% of the electorate are progressives of colour. Black, white, Latino, Asian American, Native American, Muslim American, etc. 25 plus 26 is 51%, the new American majority. The only trouble is some of those black and Latino folks in the southern states don't vote very much. So they are pouring hundreds of thousands of people into the southern states, into North Carolina, Florida, Texas, Arizona, and Georgia to flip those states. You remember, Virginia just went. Virginia has basically had a bad election for the Republicans. That's because of a Maoist group allied to Stephen Phillips, control a group called New Virginia Majority. They signed up 300,000 new voters, and they got 70,000 felons voting. They are the ones who got felons voting in Virginia, and they flipped Northern Virginia. Their subgroup, New Florida Majority, is pushing hard for felons to get the vote here, and they are signing up hundreds of thousands of black and Latino voters across your state right now. Big time, Freedom Road Socialist Organisation. These are the same people who started Black Lives Matter. They are working full on in this state and in Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, and Arizona. The Stephen Phillips' argument is this: forget the middle. Go for the progressive base and the minorities. Go hardcore. And they have shown in Virginia that that is a winning strategy. So that's what they're doing right now, because they are going to run in 2020 within a reinvigorated Rainbow Coalition. And I can tell you who's probably going to be at the top of the ticket now, because tell you in a second, Steve Phillips had 2 friends involved in radical circles with him at Stanford University. One of them was a man called Cory Booker, who is now the senator from New Jersey. And another one was a young woman called Maya Harris, who became a big-time Clinton operative, and who has a sister called Kamala Harris, who's now the senator from California. They are going to run Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, black Asian candidate. Maybe there'll be Latino in there. They are going to run candidates of colour at the top of the ticket, and they are going full out to run the Rainbow Coalition strategy of the 1980s. And they think by running that strategy and promising all the illegals in this country amnesty, that they can get 52, 53, 54% of the vote. Then they will legalise all of the illegals. They'll increase the Islamic refugee resettlement from the Middle East, and they will have you forever. That is their strategy. Destroy Trump, then run the Rainbow Coalition strategy. Does this make sense to you people? Is it in any way implausible? This is exactly what they're trying to do, folks. So we have a choice. Some of you people might be affiliated with the Tea Party. I know that Tea Parties. I heard a Tea Party lady say the other day, well, we've got President Trump now, we don't need Tea Parties anymore. People, Trump is being hammered by the North Koreans, by the Russians, by the Chinese, by equally communist forces like the Democratic Party. He's been hammered by the Rhino Republicans, by Hollywood, by the media, and anyone else you can think of. The only people who aren't giving him a hard time are his own base. And I think sometimes we need to do more of that. So he is getting pressure from every direction except the people who elected him. He is under huge threat. He's very isolated in the White House, and he's fighting back the best he can. But does he not need our support, people?
He does.
Now, did George Washington win the Revolutionary War all by himself?
No.
He was the leader, folks, but he needed an army. And Donald Trump needs an army right now, and it needs to be us. So so what do you do? See, these are the 3 most things I would be focusing on if I were you. One is, we had Keith talking about the corruption in education. And if we don't turn that around, we're going to lose anyway. Ultimately, our kids have been taken away from us. You showed us the electoral map, Keith. If there had been only 25-year-olds voting, we would have been hugely crushed. Because the young people are all bought into the progressive, or too many of them are bought into the progressive nightmare. So we need to turn that around, and I would say we have to start agitating real soon and put this on the agenda to carry out what several Republican presidents have promised us: elimination of the education department at the top. End it. Because I'll tell you what, it's going to be a lot easier to get control of Florida education if it's all decided here in Florida and not in Washington, D.C. We have to get rid of the Department of Education. We have to put that on the agenda, and that is one of our major goals. The second is we have to pressure Donald Trump to carry out what he's promised to do, and that is to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. They are a terrorist group in Russia, they are a terrorist group in Saudi Arabia and Egypt. They are the father of Hamas, they're the father of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They They are terrorists. Yet here they work in Orlando through CARE and ISNA and IGNA and other organisations. And if they're designated terrorists, that's going to make it a heck of a lot harder for them to work in this country. And that's something that can be done with a stroke of a pen, people. So we have to pressure that. Now, the other thing we have to do, and we can all be involved in this, we can all do this. Now, I'm very glad that Steve Bannon's out on the loose right now, because Steve Bannon understands something very simple. Elections do matter. And one of the big problems that Donald Trump has right now, and pushing his agenda through, is he doesn't have a reliable majority in the Senate. He's got a paper majority, but that includes Susan Collins and John McCain and Lisa Murkowski. They may as well be Democrats.
That's right.
So it makes it tough. And we know that if Donald Trump goes into 2020 or even 2018 without that border wall being built, and without the other things he's promised being done, he was going to find it very tough to win. He's got to have those promises filled. And he can only have them filled if he has a majority in the Senate that's going to help him do it. So there are 8 Republican senators up for re-election in 2018. Donald Trump, Steve Bannon is organising primary races against 7 of them right now, all except for Ted Cruz. 2 of them have already stood down, Jeff Flake and Bob Corker from Tennessee. So what he's trying to do is replace those 7 rhinos with 7 real patriots and conservatives who are on board with the America First agenda. Is that a worthwhile operation, do you think? And that is something we can all be involved in. You don't have Senate races in this state, but you can be involved in Senate races in Wyoming or in Idaho or wherever they may be. There were 30,000 volunteers in California in the last election doing phone banking into Florida and Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan, people.
We do, Trevor. Nelson.
Bill, oh, you do, Bill Nelson. Sorry, you do. My mistake. Well, there you go. Well, you don't even have to go out of state, right? So the Senate races are the most important thing happening next year. Yes, we have to hold the House. Yes, we have to get more Louis Gohmerts and people like that on our side. But the Senate is the key thing. Because if we can get 5 or 6 or 7 real conservatives into the Senate and take some of the Democrats out too, because more than 20 Democrats are up for re-election, if we can do that, we will have the biggest bloc in the Senate. And remember when Reagan got in, a lot of the Republicans hated Reagan. You know, Reagan was banned from Ohio in 1976 by the Ohio State GOP because he was this crazy right-winger who would destroy the GOP, right? So what we got to do, if we can get 7 or 8 good guys into the Senate, we become the biggest bloc. And the go-alongs to get along, go along with us. It could totally flip it. Now, is that something that's within our reach? Is that something we can do? If anybody asks me what I need to do, that is it. Get involved in those Senate races. The most important thing you can do for your kids. So what I'm saying, folks, to wrap it up, if we blow this, if we sit back and do nothing, we are going to have another Democrat president in 2020, and we've lost America. And we have lost freedom in the world, people, because if America goes down, it goes out everywhere. But if we can win this, and we can turn things around, if we can bring down the taxes, open up the energy fields, if we can stop the illegal immigration, if we can revitalise the inner cities and get on top of the crime and the drugs, if we can get the taxes down, we can have an economic boom in this country like we've never had before. We can spark liberty revolutions, not just in this country, but all over the world. So I can't promise you much, folks, but I can promise you two things. If you do nothing, your children will live in slavery. But if you give it everything you've got that's within you for your God, your constitution, your country, and your family, two things are going to happen. The first is you could give it everything you've got and still lose. But at least you will earn the right to look your children in the eye and say, I did everything I possibly could. What is that worth to you, folks? And if you win, and you can win, because God is not finished with this country yet, folks. If you win and take back your constitution and take back your country and set this country on a new path to prosperity and freedom, to have a new American Renaissance, you will spark an economic boom like you've never seen. You will spark liberty revolutions all over this planet, folks. And you will give your children not just the amazing country that you inherited, but one even greater. Is that worth fighting for?
Yeah.
So I want to say to you folks, thank you so much for what you do for America and for my country and for liberty. God bless America and God bless you all. Thank you. Thanks, Amanda.